So, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have everybody with us. Good afternoon, esteemed colleagues, dear guests, your excellencies. On behalf of Romanian Energy Center, Energynomics, with the support of Atlantic Council, Eurelectric and the Romanian Ministry of Energy, welcome to what I hope will be one of the most important discussions on the partnership of transatlantic on energy and climate. We gather here today on the eve of the 5th meeting of the Partnership for Transatlantic Energy and Climate Cooperation to focus on Romania's pivotal role in the Black Sea region. And our event is to highlight the country's specific concerns and opportunities in the broader context of the Black Sea and of the transatlantic energy and climate cooperation. A race is not won by individuals, but by shared ideals and common determination. And what a race we're in. We're aiming towards becoming climate neutral by the mid of the century, by making our economies competitive and ensure the best possible living conditions for our citizens, all in a complex and dynamic geopolitical and security context. Nobody said this would be easy, but rest assured, nothing beats the sentiment and the feeling of accomplishment. So, interesting topics, interesting themes, but what better way to talk about this than with our amazing speakers and audience here today. To win the race, one must first start the race. So, in your applause, I would like to invite on stage Varinia RADU, co-founder of Energynomics, one of the most respected media agencies on energy matters. Varinia, the stage is yours.
Hello everyone, Mr. Minister, Mr. President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome you and our co-organizing partners, Center for Romanian Energy and Atlantic Council Global Energy Center. Founded by former Ambassador and Special Envoy of the Secretary of State of Eurasian Energy, Richard Morningstar, the Global Energy Center attracts yearly in Washington, Abu Dhabi, and in capitals of European and PTEC countries officials and business leaders around the key topics concerning energy. I want to congratulate the Atlantic Council for the important role you play every year in supporting the Department of Energy and PTEC countries in co-organizing and supporting the Business Forum and ministerial events, and for bringing a diverse number of side events to Bucharest this year. And also, personally, I'd like to thank you for supporting our local energy initiatives with Energynomics since 2015 through various events and roundtables. We are living challenging times in the US and Europe alike, and energy is no exception. How can we work towards industrial competitiveness, energy security, net zero through the spirit of transatlantic cooperation while contributing to connecting and integrating this region? Topics such as consolidating the vertical corridor, generating synergies across regional makers, and addressing issues like financing, innovation, and geopolitics are on the table of the PTEC agenda. This roundtable discussion today is aimed to bring at the forefront the Black Sea region and Romania's role in the road to the energy transition. Just to take on what Mihai said earlier, this seems to be a race, the race for a net zero climate neutral economy. And a race such as this means running together with others, not winning or trying to win alone, just to paraphrase an ancient Indian saying. This is why forums such as Partnership for Transatlantic Energy and Climate Cooperation are of paramount importance for establishing common goals and identifying best practices, solutions, and actions necessary to address energy issues. Romania stands apart in the Central and Eastern Europe as an important pole of energy security with a balanced and diversified energy mix, with great potential to tap into new technologies from hydrogen, CCS, geothermal, sustainable mining to offshore wind in the Black Sea. I trust today's discussion will bring valuable insights and ignite ideas from the panelists and the audience we have today, the audience which represents the most prominent decision makers and market participants in the Romanian energy sector. And I trust the ideas of today will reverberate positively in the following days of the summit. I would like to give the floor to our partners, co-organizers, Romanian Energy Center President, Mr. Corneliu BODEA, and thank you very much for support and participating today.
Thank you very much, Varinia. Welcome, everyone. So it's a pleasure for me to see so many relevant people in the room today. That's why I want to extend also my welcome to everyone. And hopefully, I will be brief, but hopefully we'll have the chance to have an open dialogue. And I personally believe that this event should be about openly discuss, even if it's quite brief, like time-wise, to openly discuss with our speakers topics of so much importance in the moment. I personally believe that energy security topic ceased to stay only a preoccupation of countries since already a period of time. Now, energy security topics are topics to be of interest of a region and of a regional cooperation. We can't talk anymore, especially in the European Union and in this part of Europe, about energy independence. But we have to speak about energy cooperation, transmission, and between countries, and regional security, energy security. In this context, I would like to underline the importance of the Black Sea region. Whether we will have to drill, baby, drill, as in a speech held not a long time ago, or shine, panel, shine, or rotate, turbine, rotate, or even run, atom run, all of these sources are to be found in the Romanian Black Sea region. All these technologies are now relevant and commercially available and competitive for investors. This is why I believe that looking at what is happening, unfortunately, with this unfair, unprovoked war in Ukraine, whether we speak about this period of time and the role that the Black Sea region could play in the situation there, or post-war, hopefully soon, it is clear that it's the right time to discuss openly and to invite investors to come in this region. Thank you very much, and I wish to PETCU ministerial meeting conference starting tomorrow a lot of success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Varinia. Thank you, Mr. BODEA. Now we're ready to kick off the discussion, and I invite on stage with me Mr. Sebastian BURDUJA, Romanian Minister for Energy, Ms. Olga KHAKOVA, Deputy Director for European Energy Security, Atlantic Council, and Ioana PETCU, Advisor for Climate Change, Energy Policy, Climate and Sustainability at Eurelectric. Thank you. Minister BURDUJA, if you agree, we can start with you. Given Romania's strategic role in the Black Sea region, What specific policies and initiatives is your ministry implementing to enhance energy security and promote the transition to clean energy? And additionally, how do you envision Romania's role within the framework of transatlantic energy cooperation?
Well, thank you very much. Very easy questions to kick off this panel, but I am glad and honored to see so many friends in the room. The energy world here is a small world, Olga, and everybody knows everybody else. And so this really feels like I'm preaching to the choir. But nonetheless, I'm glad to be here, and I thank you for organizing this side event ahead of a very important moment for Romania and for everybody who's here. I took over the mandate about a year ago, and we had two main challenges. One was strategic, and the other one was operational. On the strategic level, what we noticed is that there was no coherent plan, there was no coherent strategy for the energy sector, and we hope to solve that by next month. And so our National Energy Strategy, 2025-2035 up to 2050, is in the final draft form. We've received a lot of feedback, and I hope that by the end of August, we will have once again an approved strategy after 15 years. And then another piece of important legislation, and the strategic one, is our offshore wind law, which I believe we're the first country in the region to have it. And I believe we are the most advanced to have the first windmills in the Black Sea by 2031, 2032. I think it's a good law. We've actually received a lot of help from the US, from the State Department. It's an example of transatlantic cooperation and partnership. And now we have to perform a study of the coast of the area in the Black Sea where the windmills will be. That should be done by mid-2025, so we're under the gun. We're working with the State Department again, with the World Bank. We're trying to find the best way to finalize this study soon, so then we can do the concessions, figure out what each investor will pay, and so on and so forth. So that's the strategic level. Second, operationally, we had to keep prices at a reasonable level and stable for the consumer. And so many of the people in the room have helped us do that with a scheme that involved fixing the price, or capping the price rather, and that has been largely functional. Some of the suppliers will disagree here, but I think most recently we've managed to pay back a lot of our debt, and I hope that is useful, and not that you were not entitled to it sooner. And secondly, our mantra has been investment, investment, investment. So we have run some numbers, and over the past year, we've managed to bring in about 13.6 billion euros in non-reimbursable and grant funding from the Recovery and Resilience Plan, and a lot of it from the Modernization Fund. So that covers the whole spectrum. It covers production from gas turbines to our nuclear program, to obviously green energy, to geothermal, and I know Elcen is paving the way to a new partnership with an American company for exploiting the geothermal potential of Bucharest. Thank you, sir. And for the grids as well. It's a priority zero for Europe right now, and indeed for Romania. And we've been talking a lot to our distribution companies. I know they are in the middle of complicated negotiations with the authority for regulating energy. And we've been very supportive of an approach that encourages investment. And to bolster that, we have brought in about 1.5 billion euros distribution and transport. Most of it is for the distribution grid. And at the end of this month, we will sign contracts that are, I believe, over 1 billion euros just on July 31st. Last but not least, I have to say that I think that Romania is uniquely positioned in the region to be very bold, which we're no longer used to being very bold. We used to be bold, but after the revolution, for some reason, we have had very low expectations. And so major projects were delayed or never done. Now I think we have every ingredient possible to be a leader in the region. Be it with our offshore wind, be it with our nuclear program, be it with hydro-pumped storage, and I'm a huge fan of it. We have a major project in Transylvania, but there's at least 2 others in the country. And it's critical to balance the entire regional grid, not just for Romania. And so, reflecting upon what is happening, I think we finally have the vision, we have the funding, and we have the people. As I said, many of them are in this room. I'm always proud to represent Romania, and I'll end here my intervention, because truly we have amazing experts in the energy sector. The quality of our specialists, the quality of the people here, not just professionally, but at a human level, is astonishing. So thank you to all of you who came from afar. I hope we're going to have a great event, and thanks for having me here.
Thank you, Minister BURDUJA. Our next speaker is the distinguished representative of Atlantic Council, Ms. KHAKOVA. In the context of the global fight against climate change and the European energy security, what do you think are the most pressing challenges facing the Black Sea region today? Additionally, how can transatlantic cooperation enhance the region's capacity to address these challenges, particularly in terms of diversifying energy sources and integrating renewable energy? Thank you.
Thank you. Some more very easy questions, but I really love what the minister said regarding being bold. Let me start with that. I think looking into the future and being more proactive together with our partners, anticipating the next energy security threats, anticipating the next crisis versus being on the back foot. And it does feel like, for the right reasons, because no one could have predicted COVID, no one could have predicted that Putin was really going to go into do a full-scale invasion in Ukraine. I mean, there's some of the best, smartest analysts could not predict that. So in a way, it's justified that we were on our back foot and we were playing defense. We're still catching up and playing defense from the consequences of what happened during COVID, the energy crisis that I would argue still not over. So I really loved your statement on being bold and looking to the future. And the way I see that is thinking of not only what are the next crises to look for. When you mentioned the grid investments, I think that's so important. And when you talk about the biggest challenges, I think that's a sleeping crisis right there if we don't get ahead of it. But it doesn't have to be. That's the beauty of it. So again, where can the transatlantic cooperation play a role? Where can we exchange best practices on, first of all, figuring out how to modernize the grid, build out the grid for the future? And it's not just building out more of what the grid looked like over the last 50 or so years, but a grid that can be more digitalized, a grid that can be more interactive with consumers who are more curious, who are more invested, and want more information on where's their energy coming from? How are they using their energy? How does it compare to their neighbor? Why are their energy prices spiking or being low? Like in the past, consumers would only ask those questions when the energy prices were really, really high or there was an outage. I think today there's this greater interest in figuring out how to have a more secure supply chain, whether you're an industry, whether you're a household, making sure that your bills are being balanced and that energy is not a huge significant part of those. And you talked about, again, the challenges of government intervention in terms of energy prices when it's truly necessary, but also looking into a vision and building out a future where you have eventually market-driven prices, but also being in touch with supporting civilians, supporting society, supporting households that are truly struggling, identifying today in this in a more competitive environment, some of the businesses have to look at their business model and figure out how much of their expenses are energy costs. And in a higher priced energy environment, what does that mean? Can they be more efficient in how they're operating? Can they find additional ways to cut, either energy consumption or just be smarter about their supply chains. So everything is changing from the way, we produce energy to the way it's being supplied across Europe. And again, when we talk about specific opportunities for transatlantic cooperation, we're not done building out interconnections. We're not done supporting each other and helping each other integrate. It's not just the physical interconnections, but it's the markets as well. And I know there's been several reports in Europe that kind of highlighted that markets are not still fully integrated. And it doesn't, it could be bad news, good news, that tons of progress has been made. And the risks of not having these fully integrated markets is that it does create additional costs. It does create additional uncertainties for businesses who want to come in and invest in certain European countries, particularly in Romania, particularly in this region, and helping them feel like they're part of a more integrated market where it's easy to understand the regulatory environment, that it's steady, it's predictable. And you talked about the energy plan, and I think that's, congratulations on that, because I think that is a roadmap that the private sector, that investors outside of Romania look at and say, okay, this is where we see the greatest opportunities. Then how do we minimize our risks as we consider these areas, as we consider geothermal, offshore wind, nuclear, and even whatever remaining oil and gas investments that still do need to be made in order to ensure security of the region. So I think in so many ways, there's uncertainty, there's fear, there's confusion, there's all sorts of emotions that I feel like are being experienced on both sides of the Atlantic at the moment. Now, we can let these emotions paralyze us and kind of just step back and say, this is too much. You have cyber attacks, you have digitalization, you have all of these transformations happening in parallel at the same time. It's overwhelming. Or we can take a look and figure out how to transform our energy systems together and create something that's more secure, more resilient. The recent Microsoft outage, we all know that wasn't a cyber security attack. But I will challenge you to think of that, when we live in such a digitalized world, and all of the energy systems are right now so integrated, so interconnected, how do we, whether it's a human error or a cyber attack or something else, how do we protect our systems into the future? How do we, again, get ahead of the next energy security crisis together and actually focus on building a future that we want to see rather than avoiding the next big risk?
Thank you, Ms. KHAKOVA. My next easy question, maybe the easiest so far, goes toward the distinguished representative of Eurelectric. Ms. PETCU, you are involved in the Chief Association on Electricity Sector in Europe. What are the key insights and recommendations you can offer regarding the integration of renewable energy sources into the European grid? And specifically, how can Romania leverage these insights to enhance its energy transition and meet its climate goals?
Thank you very much. This is definitely not the easiest question that I could have received today. I think Europe is a pioneer when it comes to the renewable energy integration. We have seen significant strands across the EU, and very positive news this year is that the electricity was already produced, 50% of the electricity we have in Europe was produced with renewables. Also, another positive aspect about last year's electricity mix across the EU is that renewables with nuclear produce 75% of the electricity needs. These are significant evolutions if we think that maybe 5-6 years ago we were way below these levels. But this is a challenge that we have to continue to deploy at pace. We need to faster the permitting processes, which are significantly difficult across the EU, not necessarily in Romania or just in this area, but we've seen difficulties with permitting all over Europe. There are difficulties in terms of storage capacities. There are difficulties also in terms of grid deployment and modernization. So we need to, I share the thoughts of the two panelists I've had here that emphasize the critical importance of grid infrastructure. If we look at Europe today, on average, we invest 33 billion per year. This is not enough. We need to increase the investment need in grids, and I'm talking here only at distribution level, let alone the transmission level, which is another component of the grid. We need to invest around 66 billion every year until 2030. This is enormous. This is a significant investment challenge that lies ahead of us. But this figure can be reduced to 55% if 55 billion, sorry, if several elements come together. One of them is electrification. We need to increase the electrification rates across the EU. Electrification has been stagnating around 23%. Now, one question is, which part of this stagnation is explained by increased efficiency gains? Because we have gained in efficiency, of course. Which part of it is triggered by deindustrialization? We are losing a big share of our industrial consumers to countries or to other constituencies. I would not name China specifically, but there is one place where a lot of our businesses are moving, and especially in terms of manufacturing capacities, we are growing another over-reliance and over-dependence. We've had a brutal wake-up call with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We've learned how important it is to have a diversified supply, and how important it was to go out of fossil fuels. We should avoid making the same mistake again with other components, raw materials or technologies that are a must for the energy transition. If we look at the automotive sector, for example, while us in Europe, even in the United States, we were still grappling with the idea of whether the EVs will ever become mainstream. China invested massively in the entire EV supply chain. And today, the Chinese vehicles are flooding the European and the American roads. And what are countries doing nowadays? Well, they are looking towards a return of protectionist approaches. We are looking towards trade barriers. And these are not good for international cooperation. Instead of raising these barriers, we should strengthen the international order. We should strengthen together the WTO. We should work together more for international cooperation, diversification of supplies, because a world that is interconnected functions better than a world where we have these tiny fights between ourselves, where we return only to our national needs and we don't look and we don't think outside the box. We cannot be competitive on everything. And if I can go back to one more thing that is essential for renewables, so I can conclude the question. We are looking at a number of hours with very high price levels in Eastern Europe, whereas in Iberia we see significant amounts of hours with negative prices. The issue here is the lack of interconnection. The same thing that you, Olga, have mentioned is the absence or not completion of the single market. We need this interconnection in order to ensure that that electricity flows across the continent, that our consumers can benefit from the increased amounts of clean electricity. By 2040, we need to triple the installed capacity, the total installed capacity of the power sector, and renewables need to increase 5-fold. This is a challenge, and we should cooperate together to deliver. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our speakers. Time-wise, we're doing good. We still have 5-10 minutes until Mr. BURDUJA has to leave to the next engagement. So, should there be any questions from the room, now is a good time. So
dear guests, the microphone is here. So if you have any questions or comments for our speakers, please raise your hand and I'll make sure your voice gets some more volume.
Thank you very much. I will address this question. Of course, I will start with Mr. Minister because he is with the pressure of time, but I will address the same question to all the panelists. And the question is that it's a very well-known energy trilemma defined by World Energy Council. And I found it very, philosophically, but also very practical question and trilemma. So we are playing with security, energy security, affordability, and renewable energy, green energy. Do you believe that this is a trilemma where we can, from time to time, give weights to any of the elements, or is just the fact that we have to find a way to solve that all these three components of the trilemma will be solved in the same time?
I guess I'll start. Look, I was very explicit throughout this past year that the trilemma has a certain priority ranking attached to security and affordability and green level, I guess, the greenness of our system. And it's in exactly that order. I don't think you can judge it differently. And I think countries that have prioritized differently, such as green, affordability, security, are now paying the bill somehow, or at least realizing that they made very, stupid choices, to be honest. I think going to what you said earlier, and I know Mr. Chirițoi is here from the Competition Council, and I'm a firm believer in markets. I think markets are good. I think they can help us with affordability, they can help us with security, they can help us have more green energy, but not compromise balancing the grid and so on and so forth. But frankly, what you see on the map today is a situation that is not fair. If you look at the energy map over the past 2 weeks, you see in Romania, we're paying prices that are 10 times as much as France, Spain, Portugal, 20 times more than in the Nordic countries, so on and so forth. We're all supposed to be in the single market, right? And I understand that this is happening. Essentially, the market was decoupled. We're also shouldering much of the effort to help Ukraine, and that's fine. Okay, we've been doing it. But at some point, we have to ask ourselves, are we being fair? Is this truly a functional single European market? I think Eurelectric has a huge importance in making that point. We can make it as a government, and we will, and we have. But at the same time, I mean, how do we explain to our citizens what's happening? We have to export, or we are exporting energy to Moldova and Ukraine and helping their energy systems, but at the same time, why can't we benefit from cheaper energy from the West? Technically, I understand there's infrastructure works in Hungary, okay? Why couldn't they be better coordinated? What is the big surprise that Russia has been attacking Ukraine's energy infrastructure? Are we that surprised that it's a very hot summer and we have a lot of drought? I don't think so. So help us define the policies that will make this market more fair, because this will maintain European unity. This will add credibility to the EU project, to transatlantic partnership, and it will help minimize the voices that have every interest in compromising Romania's role in the EU, Romania's special relationship with the US, and so on and so forth. But for now, people are looking at a map, and we have a very different color than Western Europe. I hope I was controversial enough to spark debate.
I can add on just a little bit because I know we're running out of time. I want to make sure others have a chance to ask the minister. I think you have to pursue all three at the same time, with a caveat that in certain times, one of the three or two of the three may be more important, as we saw during the energy crisis, like the supply. And when you forget about one, then you'll have to overcompensate later on, right? So we kind of forgot about supply security, and we took supply security for granted. So then we had to overcompensate in that area. So, but all three strategically can reinforce each other, again, if it's a proactive strategy. Hope is not a strategy. Hoping that the three will balance out, absolutely not. Being realistic about where the prices are, where the challenges are, where different countries in Europe are starting off, and the capacities the energy potential, the skill set that each kind of country has. And then, are there, like, what's exactly causing this, whether it's price imbalance, whether there's sometimes, we all know, like, additional, you all know more than I do through your work, additional auxiliary like all sorts of charges that happen at the borders, and what does that mean to market distortion and why those charges exist, some of them fair, some of them we could discuss. And figuring out, why is sometimes clean energy produced in one country, being curtailed versus being sent off across the European market. I mean, in today's world, what a waste, right? So we have to be able to assess like where that's happening. And as Romania is looking to build out additional clean energy, wind and other, hopefully, nuclear energy, there's so much potential, so many exciting developments happening with the US partnership and other countries. Just being realistic about what does it take to then get that energy on the market, but also being realistic about what was said earlier today, where some countries are looking inward. We can have these really nice speeches on the stage and talk about integration and everything, but sometimes what happens is, and I'm not talking about Romania, I'm talking about multiple countries across Europe, sometimes then people go back to their offices and go, okay, well, how do we really ensure our national energy security? How do we really think through our strategy? How do we ensure that we can produce as much energy as cheaply as possible? And then think through the interconnections as kind of maybe insurance policy, maybe as a nice to have, versus a kind of, to your point, as a genuinely integrated strategy. And that's reality today, is that a lot of countries have been still shocked by the energy crisis and are looking more inwards, and we have to accept that reality and figure out how to encourage that further market integration without putting countries in an uncomfortable position. And just final thing, just the summer being extremely hot, even in just Washington, D.C., you can already sense it that our cities are not prepared. I'll tell you, there's some days where it was so hot that people that would have biked or walked, were all taking the metro. It was literally just so congested to the point where it was unsafe. This is just one small example. So we truly are also not prepared to cool our cities and for these extreme weather events. You saw what was happening in Texas, in US. That then directly impacts how much we can export to other countries in terms of LNG and other fuels. So just getting ahead of that and getting that balance right. I think we can get it right, but again, we have to be realistic about where we're starting off and what needs to happen without, just kind of wishful thinking and just using these three words, these three values. Like, what do they actually mean, and what does it actually look like, and what are the challenges? Because I can tell you, like, some of those are hard to say out loud, but we have to be real.
Maybe if I could just add one small thing, I think it's always a matter of balance. I think renewables can be the answer to affordability, but it's important how we balance their integration in the market. Until we manage to decarbonize, until we manage to electrify more, we will need all the sources of generation available because we need to ensure the security of supply. We need to progressively phase out fossil fuels. And in our studies, we believe that in 2040, the power sector can be carbon neutral in Europe. We can do this. It's just a matter of balancing. And in addition to that, there is a matter of certainty, of regulatory certainty. We need to know that our governments and the leaders at EU level, for instance, but also internationally, stand behind the business community and encourage them to invest. This is key to tackle the three angles of the triangle.
Thank you. I think we have a question from here, and then from the gentleman in the right, please.
Bogdan Cheițoiu. Not quite so much a question, more a reaction to what was said, especially by Minister BURDUJA, but also by Ioana. I also believe in markets a lot, I think it comes with the job description, so I have to. And I think markets could help with all the three elements. Definitely could help with security, because it gives you diversity, you have alternatives. Market will help with affordability. It's sometimes easier. Self-sufficiency is very expensive. So alternative markets make it cheaper. And also, if you have renewables, it's easier, cheaper to balance them if you have integrated markets. But The minister was mentioning the situation we are finding ourselves in today. And my point, discussion we have sometimes in the energy regulator, in the ASA, the agency regulating energy in Europe, yeah. And especially because I come from the competition world, where we are very well integrated. Competition is it's an old policy, and because it's an old policy of the EU, it's very integrated. Energy is not in the same situation. In my view, comparing with the competition world, energy is a laggard. And I believe in that market, an integrated EU market would help a lot. I think you need trust. We are all in EU, so there should be trust. We are all in NATO. Almost everybody in the EU is in NATO, so we somehow trust each other with our national security. But I still think there is a deficit of trust in energy, what I couldn't understand. And my solution to solve it is to move it up. I think it takes time to develop trust, and I think if we move the policy to the EU level, if we make a stronger Europe, a stronger center, including a stronger energy agency in Europe, I think this will give countries like Romania, I think, will make us trust more the system than if we live more or less on bilateral relations as well function right now. So again, I think markets could work. Yeah, they're going to help a lot. But I think we need more Europe to develop trust into this market, because to entrust your fate to your neighbors, the willingness and ability to help you, to supply you when you need this supply, it's a leap of faith. And I guess it's definitely cheaper than being autarkic, than trying to be self-sufficient. So there's a communist way, the old way, which is still very popular in Romania. We tend to call it security. I think it's pretty wasteful. But again, to move to that more efficient world, we need this leap of faith, and I think more Europe would help here.
Thank you, Mr. Chițu, for your comments. If any of the speakers want to say a few more words on this, please. If not, I will please, Mr. Minister.
Very briefly, and Bogdan Chirițoi is one of our foremost experts. He's doing a fantastic job, and believe me, at some point I will write a book about how we managed to solve certain issues, and he will be in it, believe it or not. But look, I think that deep down, I mean, the essential question is about economic competitiveness, and the price of energy is at the core of each country's economic development strategy. That's why, I don't know if I'm being too pragmatic or Kissinger-like, but it's hard to foresee a Europe that will be fair to everybody, with a single market authority at the European level, and not care about how differences in energy prices affect the economic development prospects of each EU member state. Sorry for the convoluted answer, and maybe too pragmatic, but anyway.
Thank you. Please, Ioana.
Maybe if I can just add to that the fact that we all still have different starting points in the energy transition, and it's very important to keep in mind the national particularities when addressing or creating European legislation, but the need for coordination is also very important. We're trying to harmonize as much as possible the rules so that investors can come from one market to the other and do the necessary investments and support also the local businesses and local communities. And because you've also mentioned the notion of competitiveness and what affects the electricity prices and the energy costs, where are we sourcing the technologies that we need? If you look at the solar panels, Europe doesn't have the capacity to produce as much as we need to install by 2030. We have serious manufacturing issues in Europe, both on the technological side, so on the renewable side. We are leaders in transformers, for sure. We are leaders in wind, but we are lacking manufacturing facilities for solar, we are lacking facilities for batteries. And it's good, you said hydropower is, pumped hydro is your favorite technology, or among your favorite technologies. It's essential because it ensures 96% of the storage capacity across the EU. This is amazing for long-term seasonal storage, but we also need short-term batteries and other storage capacities. We also need demand-side management, and here the engagement with our consumers is essential. We have industrial consumers that can play flexibility roles in balancing the grids and the needs. We also have the possibility to work closer with residential consumers. We need smart meters across the EU. We also need education. We also need to help people understand how the system works, when it is more efficient to start your washing machine. Is it at peak hour, in the evening?
I just said that in the weekend.
Yeah. Or
Subject of many jokes.
yeah, so you know, as I understand it's a subject of joke, but it's also a way of managing the system smartly, learning how to work when the prices are interesting, learning when to charge your electric vehicle and discharge the battery of your EV into the system. So we need to learn to work together closer.
Thank you. The priorities of Mr. BURDUJA agenda has reached to me, so I understand you have to leave now. Thank you very much for being with us for this time. We will stay for...
Mr. Ovidiu Dranga, representing the Eurelectric Center for Resilience. Thank you very much for your interventions and your presentations. I'd like to ask you two questions and before that a very short comment. We all know that Russia has included energy in its arsenal in the conflict in the brutal war against, an illegal war against Ukraine. I'm wondering what's your opinion about energy resilience of countries belonging to the eastern flank of NATO, and in this context, there is the energy resilience of Romania. I mean, how resilient do you think Romania is at this moment? And how resilient eastern flank countries are in this context? Because I think we might not be that far from a moment in which an energy-related crisis triggered by Russia could affect eastern flank countries directly. Thank you.
Really great question. Thank you so much for bringing it up. I think we saw clearer than ever in the last 2.5 coming on to 3 years and a couple of months, how this war is not just contained in Ukraine. This is Russia's energy war on Europe broadly, and the front lines no longer look just like kinetic bombs. It's a lot more complex now. It's cybersecurity attacks. It's supply manipulation. It is not pumping. Even before the war started, we remember when Russia didn't fully fill up storage across Europe, and that exacerbated the pricing crisis and then followed in the spring. We're seeing all sorts of critical energy infrastructure being attacked. We're seeing that in the Baltics region. We're seeing it elsewhere. We're also seeing a lot of these cybersecurity attacks. We're not seeing big stories about them. Why? Because they have been addressed, they have been prevented, or they have quickly recovered, and it hasn't made the news stories, which is a massive win. So I would say the front lines look very different than they have in the last several decades, and preparing for the worst and assuming the worst. And we just hosted the NATO summit in DC. And we hosted one event on the Hill, actually with several congressmen, to kind of talk about what is NATO's role when it comes to defending energy security. Because NATO forces, and to be ready, they need to have secure energy supplies and their own unique energy supplies. But you also need kind of NATO coordination now in this new world of risks to figure out how to protect and respond to attacks on critical energy infrastructure. So I think those attacks will become more frequent, more complex, harder to pin down on who exactly is responsible. I think there's going to be disinformation, confusion. So getting ahead of all of this will be extremely important. And so what does that look like on the ground? It's exchanging information on risks, both through whether it's NATO lens, whether it's EU lens, whether it's cybersecurity coordination. But it's also utilizing AI and other digital services to be able to assess risk and have an understanding when something does go wrong, being able to respond within seconds. And we do have the technologies to date to be able to do that. It's just, are we implementing it fully? And I do think AI can play an interesting role. And then, add another caveat, AI also draws in a lot of energy. So it can also be helpful, but also can be an issue for countries that are short of energy supplies. So that's my short take on it.
So just to complement on that, I think you're right to say that Russia has diversified or has changed a little bit the spectrum of war. It has brought us the realization of supply dependencies, but I also believe that Europe moved very well in a very short time frame. I think if you look at the price spikes that followed Russia's invasion of Ukraine in terms of energy, now, 2 years later, the prices are going back to pre-war levels. We are still above pre-COVID levels, but the electricity prices across the EU are going down. I think the fact that we accelerated and we emphasized our bet on decarbonization was very important. This doesn't mean we are at bay, and I think cybersecurity will be a very, very difficult discussion to have, but I also believe in Europe we have very strong regulations in terms of cybersecurity, and that our companies are very well prepared to respond to this. Then I also remember something. I think in international law, war is off limits in area with nuclear technologies, with dams and dikes. Now this is presumably your counterpart is a person or a leader that respects international law. So how do we make sure that other sources of generation, other technologies are protected? And how do we ensure that everyone across the globe respects the global order? Those are very difficult questions to ask, but I think we will always remain with a question while we strive to do as much as possible at home to ensure our own security of supply with our European partners.
Thank you for the answers. I have another question from here, please.
Dumitru Sârbu. Regarding cybersecurity, last week we had an incident with an updating from Microsoft. You mentioned all the solar panels are made in China, but we forgot the inverters which are connected in the cloud in China. What about these cybersecurity threats from China? If they want to shut down all inverters, we are blackout.
I think this is always a possibility, and I think if we look at the Net Zero Industry Act, which was adopted last year and is part of Europe's strategy to enhance our industrial competitiveness, if you look at the non-price criteria for tenders in renewable energy projects, there are references to excluding from the source of supply countries that are not signatories of the government procurement agreement. So I think there are strives across the EU to ensure that the products that we put on the market are safe from a cyber perspective also.
I think you touched on something that's really interesting when we talk about supply chains from China. Just the reality of, we can't decarbonize without massive amounts of exports from China. That's just the reality. However, we could de-risk certain aspects of it, and US and Europe still have a very different approach to China. That's just the reality. You let me know if you agree or disagree. But taking a look at that supply chain, and like you said, what's coming in that's actually like software, technical, digitalized pieces that can be used to shut entire system down or part of a system versus just something that you can utilize materials and other essential components of solar panels, wind turbines and such that are more of just something that's less tech integrated, but you still need it to build out your clean energy supply chains. So I think not treating all clean energy exports from China the same way and figuring out which ones actually pose a cybersecurity risk versus the ones that we just need to be real about, like we need the volumes, right? While still looking at realistic ways to diversify production, processing, and manufacturing in the United States, in Europe, and then working together to do that in third countries as well in a responsible, environmentally friendly way with strict labor laws.
I totally agree with you.
Thank you. We have yet another question from here.
Hello, Blas Stoicescu, Sustainable Fuels Association. Thank you for your words and wisdom. One question from us would be regarding NATO's, or let's say the Atlantic Council's perception over public acceptance efforts in Europe, whereas in Romania we are a focal point of manipulation, where, let's give us a certain example, the public perception over the investments of the European Central Bank that prints thousands of trillions of euros just for this green transition. So the general perception in Romania is why are we wasting money when that money is just printed, is fresh off the presses? How can we attenuate that general perception, and how can we teach the population that's not in the Marriott that they have to be part of this transition because it's in their benefit? Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. And just to clarify, Atlantic Council doesn't have, the cool thing about our organization, we don't have like our official opinion on anything. We have a bunch of experts, and sometimes those experts actually disagree or see things from very different perspectives. So there isn't, I'm not speaking as an official, this is Atlantic Council take. This is someone who works at the council, who's been at the council for close to 6 years now, and this is my take on the issue. I think disinformation is a massive barrier to also transatlantic cooperation. And I'll give you just a couple of quick examples. However, I think it's also an opportunity. With the energy crisis, as I mentioned earlier, a lot more people are paying attention to where the energy comes from, how it's being used, what are the certain things on their bills, how does it break down? In US, people are asking, questions of, well, how do our exports to Europe and other places around the world, how do they impact our own energy prices? And there's a lot of disinformation around that as well, right? Again, LNG disinformation across Europe, too, huge, massive issue in terms of just being realistic about what the current supply is, where the current needs are, versus where Europe needs to go to and US needs to go to decarbonize. I would say nuclear is another really unfortunate, really sad and unfortunate example. And I thought that the energy crisis would have been a wake-up call to kind of unite Europe across seeing nuclear as an essential piece. And you're still seeing a breakdown between countries, certain like countries like Germany who phased out their nuclear energy, and then some countries who are doubling down, and countries who are exploring and see that as a huge essential part of the energy mix, that they can't see a real, affordable, competitive decarbonization strategy without nuclear energy. I think, give me an energy source and I'll give you an example of disinformation and confusion that's created. So I think, so what do we learn here? How do we have a cohesive, clear transatlantic strategy on getting ahead of disinfo and continuing, not only educating, not talking at people, but working with people and helping people understand and answering questions, not belittling people saying, oh, no, you don't know, you don't understand science. Just trust me on this. No, but really working with people and helping people understand, like, even just the reality of where current energy mix is, because I will tell you, even that is probably still being lost. I still think that there's a disconnect where people think that we get our, just globally, like even in Europe, where Europe gets its energy, if you were to kind of break it down and get an average person off the street and say, okay, can you guess how much is coming from renewables, how much is coming from gas, oil? Same thing in the United States. So helping people understand where we're starting off, what are the actual costs, right? Like how does that work, like the money printing works? And then how does a transatlantic cooperation on these issues, can actually help both of us be more competitive, reduce costs, be stronger together, versus kind of pinning us against each other, because there's also disinformation on that as well, unfortunately.
Definitely, there is a lot of disinformation, and I think it sometimes also stems from, I share the European maybe idea here, that our citizens were not educated about how the electricity or the energy prices are formed. As you were saying, what is the energy mix, what are the changes, And we also come from an area where we had monopoles in different countries. We had regulated prices. The customer was just used to receiving a bill at home at the end of the month or the year and whatever, and they didn't care what was behind that bill. And now a lot has changed and we are starting to learn, and I think it's very important for everyone to be able to communicate this to the consumers, to help them understand what's happening behind, and to help them, because education is basically the weapon that we have against disinformation. So we need to be there for them. We need to help them learn and understand how they can work with us.
Thank you. Thank you for your answers. I think according to our agenda, we have time for 2 questions maybe. So,
to simplify some of our processes while also maintaining the highest environmental and social standards. We need to simplify bureaucracy. We need to strengthen the administration so that when there are permitting issues, a lot of these projects that are stuck in permitting are due to the lack of sufficient staff in local administrations. This is what we need to do to build speed and to deploy clean and renewable technologies at pace. Nuclear is a very important sector. You were mentioning it. It takes over 25 years to build a nuclear power plant. How can we solve this issue?
thank you. So from the Brussels, here is not necessarily a bug, but a feature being slow. Please, from the Washington, DC.
No, I mean, I think unfortunately, like you mentioned permitting, I think same issue in the United States. I mean, we don't have it figured out, but it's also not about completely disregarding regulations or skipping environmental regulations. It's about doing things in a smart way. And I think utilizing technology and automation. So when you do environmental assessment, understanding and knowing that, if there's some kind of a protected animal or something that's in a particular piece of land, knowing that information sooner, faster, and kind of letting the companies, investors know and saying, hey, if you just move this, several miles this way or over here and adjust the project this way, versus making that company, making those investors wait for years to get a no. No one wins when this happens. Like I would say, even like the citizens don't win, the companies don't win, the investors don't win when you have this uncertainty, this backlog. So we haven't fully figured out how to do it right, how to balance kind of the environment, making sure that yes, you take a look at the environmental assessment, but you do it in a way that's smart, that's fast, and you can make quick decisions. It's interesting, during the energy crisis, some projects moved at record speed. And I mean, in those cases, like the environmental assessments were completely skipped, but I would argue that we can still have that speed. We can figure out a way how to merge the two extremes. Germany built out LNG terminals in record time after, decades and decades of discussions from US of, okay, maybe you should build 1 or 2 as an insurance mechanism. They got it done, some of them in months. I mean, it was unbelievable. Some of the clean energy deployments, solar and wind, record amounts invested. So how do we take that level of speed and combine it with the future investments that need to happen?
Thank you. I have another question from here, or maybe a comment.
Thank you so much. Because we've been advised to be bold, I dare to put something on the table. For example, gas. Romania is still seeking this opportunity to become one of the most important producers, 2027, with an important field offshore coming on the ground. My question to you is, how do you see the gas industry developing? We have something like more than 70,000 kilometers of infrastructure on the ground in Romania. Investments needs to be recovered. As you know, we have like 20, 30, 40 years to recover this investment, but still we need to keep this sector going. So my question is, how do you see, what type of opportunities you see on the gas field, including the infrastructure, green gas, hydrogen now it's subject of formal or informal, but it's somehow on hold at EU level too. So I'll be very interested about your perspective here.
I think gas plays an important role in our energy security. It plays a role in the power sector for sure. It has also been the main price-setting technology for the past 2 years in the electricity mix. So this has given us quite some high energy prices. But this is because the gas was imported. Romania has the potential to extract this and to export it in the EU. I think we also have some sunset clauses in the EU. We have a strategy towards 2050 that tells us we need to be climate neutral. And I think in this regard, the gas industry needs to find ways to cancel or to compensate for the CO2 emissions. And whether the carbon capture and storage is the answer, we don't know for sure, but it is part of the strategies that will come from the EU this year. You know, there is this industrial carbon management strategy that was announced this February together with the 2040 strategy. So I think gas will remain in the mix. It will be a question on how to ensure it's as carbon neutral as possible.
I agree. I think to be realistic, we can't have a discussion and pretend like gas is not going to have an important role in Europe. However, as you mentioned, there will be pressure to minimize carbon emissions throughout the value chain. And where we have seen really interesting progress is the methane emission management. It always starts with a tracking system that's consistent. And I think we're making good progress, but we're not quite there yet. I think we'll see what happens in Baku. We'll see what happens in Brazil the following year for the COP next year. But I think this is where the realities of the progress can be made. For investors in Romania, these are the questions they're asking. Will Europe have some strict kind of, no more gas laws in the future that, if you were to go in and invest a significant amount of money into a certain project, will you then get, penalized some unexpected amount? That's why that tracking of methane today and having a very clear system so that as an investor, yes, you're going to always have to be responsible and transparent about your emissions, but your investment will still thrive in Europe because in the end of the day, Europe still needs gas. And let's be honest, there's a ton of LNG coming from Russia. Pipe gas exports have decreased quite a bit. However, tons and tons of LNG coming in, LNG from other parts of the world coming in as well. So that's just the reality of where Europe is today. So, and then what was discussed earlier by the ministers and others, providing that predictable environment for investors. So when they go in, they want to know the tax environment, the political environment. They just want that consistency, predictability. Of course, it's easier said than done. I mean, look at what's happening on both sides of the ocean. It's easier said than done. Everyone wants predictability in a really wild and predictable world. But that's what the investors look for. What does this mean? Climate policy. What does this mean? Tax environment. What does this mean? Political stability. What does it mean? Political directions. And what can I export to other countries in Europe? And is the infrastructure there? And we still haven't fully completed. I would say that the vertical corridor that Ambassador Paya talks about quite a bit, that hasn't still fully been completed, and that goes back to the discussion of market disintegration. So it all comes back together.
Thank you. Now is the time for my last call for the audience. If any question or comment. If not, I will give the floor for the last time to Olga. Thank you very much. It was not exactly what we planned, but I think it went very well, the conversation. If you can tell us a few words about what we should expect from tomorrow and the day after tomorrow in the PTEC meeting, maybe it'd be useful for all of us. Thank you.
No, absolutely. The reason why I have been checking my phone is not to be rude, but because of getting these PTEC updates and new speakers being added and sessions being slightly updated, moved around. So my mind has been fully on PTEC. Atlantic Council has been really honored to participate, engage in PTEC from the very beginning, from the time it was announced in Houston to Lithuania to Poland to Croatia to now in Romania. I've seen that. I was very lucky to see that journey from the very beginning. But not just PTEC, also 3Cs. We were here for 3Cs last year. So for our organization, it's an honor to actually see how, when we say transatlantic cooperation, what does that mean? And I think the discussions and hopefully the conversations, the deals that happen, the agreements, the connections that happen during PTEC, I hope that will take these big fancy ideas and kind of get them moving into on the shovel on the ground projects or actual changes throughout the markets and more efficient collaboration across the Atlantic. I would say that the business forum, you can check out the agenda online. We have really fantastic sessions exactly on the topics that we discussed today. Incredible government officials from the region. And then the ministerial is half a day. Then the second part is closed door sessions. So, and then tomorrow there's a reception right after the main programming ends. So if any of you have any issues on getting into the PTEC website, taking a look at the agenda, take a look at the speakers, take a look at, thinking through like who do you want to meet with and, do bilateral meetings with, like lots of opportunities to network. So I would say we're really proud of the agenda. We're honored to be partnering on organizing this with DOE and, of course, the Romanian Energy Ministry. It's been an honor, and we look forward to a really productive 2 days. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you also, Olga, Ioana, and also Minister BURDUJA for being here with us, because we have the opportunity to have a very view ahead in the future for the next 2 days. So we cover many of the topics that will also be important tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. Thank you also, Atlantic Council, for being with us once again this year. CRE, for joining the efforts with us and organizing this event. Thank you, all of you, for being here. Also, thanks for Electrica, who supported this meeting today at Marriott. And I think that what follows is that we, Energynomics, will prepare some articles based on the comments here, so that our friends that are in vacation, on holidays, will have the opportunity to discover what we discussed here. Thank you. We have 20 minutes, 40 minutes for more coffee or drinks now. Thank you.